Hi, so today I'm going to start the process to make salsa. I have a ton of tomatoes in my garden along with peppers, and I've bought onions, and so I'm ready to go. So the first step is I have my tomatoes here, and they are dirty, so I need to wash them. And then I'm going to use a cutting board to cut out any bad spot that I may have. I'm also going to easily take the center out just because the core, when you blend it up into salsa, it can be very tough. So I want to take that out. And then my step today, I'm actually going to make my salsa tomorrow, but I need to blanch my tomatoes, which means you put them in hot water just for a few minutes, and then you pull them out, and you're going to put them in a bowl of ice water. And so it quicks the cooking when you shock them, and then I will put them in a bowl and put them in the refrigerator for a day. And what that helps me do is take the skins off, and I don't have to sit and peel strip by strip. Tomorrow when I get them out of the refrigerator, they will be easy and the whole skins will just fall off. It is actually a trick that Dr. Mobley taught me my first year teaching. If you don't know Dr. Mobley, she used to be a principal at our school, an assistant principal, and now she's the assistant superintendent for MCCSC. So great tip. Thanks so much, Dr. Mobley, for sharing that because it makes making salsa so much easier. So to get started, I have my garbage bowl. I'm going to need a cutting board, and then I'm going to need a paring knife. And you want a small knife, and I have several paring knives, but I kind of want to show you the difference. Just so happens that this drawer is a hot mess. So this is a great paring knife. It's small. It's very easy to manipulate around something so small as a tomato. And then this one has a serrated blade. And so it's really handy for tomatoes. And now I'm going to wash my tomatoes. So I'm going to use my little colander, and I can also put in different colander down in there. I like to wash from colander to colander just because you can kind of ensure that it is good and clean. And I washed dishes and washed out my sink, and there's still a little soap, so I'm just going to rinse that off real fast. And you're going to want your garbage bowl because the vines are still on them. So I just take my tomatoes and I wash them as well as I can. And these tomatoes are very ripe, so there are some bad spots in that I'll need to cut out. Okay, so all of my tomatoes are washed, and so now I'm going to start a stock pot full of water, and you want it on high, and you want it to be boiling before you put your tomatoes in. And now I'm going to take my tomato, and I'm going to carefully just core it. So you just take it and go around where the stem was. So I have grapevine tomatoes. I have all different kinds of tomatoes, but I like these because they don't get overly large like a big boy tomato. So right there is the core that we want to take out. And if you can tell, it is really tough. So you just don't want that down in your salsa. I usually make my salsa to be medium to spicy. I can't get it too spicy just because my kids won't eat it. And we love chips and salsa. I like to put it in my taco meat, casseroles. I do a chicken salsa, which you just put frozen chicken breasts in the crock pot with a jar of this salsa and let it cook all day long. And then when I get home from school, I just shred it with a fork, and it's so tender. And we eat it on quesadillas and nachos and tacos. Really, the possibilities are endless. So I'm just taking the core out of these and again checking them again to make sure there's no bad spots. I have one that has a big bruise on it because Cole was trying to help me and he accidentally dropped it. But I think it'll be fine. And I do use a food processor to help make my salsa a little less work. I quarter my veggies and then I let the food processor do its work. And you will want a hot water bath this salsa because I'm not just making enough for one batch, one serving, one jar full, so it's not gonna last very long if you don't process it. Because tomatoes are acidic, you can use hot water bath method. Something like green beans, you need to do a pressure cooker. So I use a pressure canner. Okay, so I have all of my tomatoes hauled out from the center, and my water is about to boil. You're going to need 2 bowls. You're going to need one that has ice water in, so I'm going to put some ice in this. I have enough ice for it to be about like that, and I'm just going to fill it with cold ice water. And then we need another bowl to put them after they've been chopped in this. And then you're going to want a spoon that has slots. And I'm not seeing what I want, so I'm going to actually use my strainer to grab the tomatoes. And my water's about to boil, and you can do about 5 or 6 at a time. And what I do is 2 minutes in the hot water, 2 minutes in the water, cold bath, and then you just kind of keep rotating around. And I do 4 or 5 tomatoes at a time because you want the water to stay boiling the entire time of this process. So I'm actually going to turn it so you can see what I'm doing. I've got a few minutes here, starting to boil good. And I like to time because you don't want to overcook the tomatoes, especially because we are hot water bathing them. It's going to cook inside the jar as well. And a lot of people do pint jars for salsa. We eat it so fast. Mexican food is something that we have at least once a week, if not more. And my kids like to snack on chips and salsa as a healthy snack. So we go through the quart-sized jars, probably one every week, week and a half. So we go through the salsa. And I usually make about 3 batches, but my tomatoes have just now started to come on. So hopefully I do get 3 batches of salsa. So I got my bowls lined up here. I've got my ice water bath, and then the bowl that is going to go in the fridge. I'll cover it with saran wrap, and then my boiling water here. So I think we're about ready to go. So I'm going to gently put in, I'm actually going to use the strainer so it doesn't splash water on me. And I'm not going to start the timer until I have all the tomatoes for this batch in the water. So for this one, I'm going to do 5 tomatoes. And I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. You just let them go. So you just let it boil. What this does is semi-cooks the tomato so it's not raw. It also brings all the juices out. And then tomorrow when I peel them, I'll also kind of de-seed some of them because that's what makes your salsa watery. My grandma also adds a can of diced tomatoes when her tomatoes are extra juicy to kind of help thicken the salsa. And I've done that too. So it just really depends on your tomatoes and, you know, when you pick them. All right, so now I'm just going to take them one by one and carefully put them in the ice water. And you will have to add more ice because the batches Alright, so that's the last batch. These have been sitting in there. I'm going to get them out of the ice bath. And as you can tell, the skins are already starting to come off, which is great. That means tomorrow that job will be so much easier. And I actually may need 2 bowls versus just one. I'm going to dry this out. I'm going to just put those down in there. This bowl may fit them better than that other one anyway. And I'm just going to put it in the refrigerator and cover it with saran wrap. And then tomorrow, when I do the rest of the salsa, they'll be ready to go. Alright, so today we're going to finish up our salsa. First, I need to skin and chop my tomatoes. I have a spoon here if I want to dig out some seeds so that they're not so watery. You don't want your salsa to be watery. So I'm just going to peel my tomatoes. Because I blanched them yesterday and put them in the refrigerator, the skins are just falling off. If you do it right out of the blanch water, usually it takes like strip by strip. And so this method that Dr. Mobley taught me has really quickened this process. Alright, so that was 14 1/4 cups of tomatoes. So I'm going to clean up my cutting board and wash my hands, and then we're going to start with peppers and onions next. Alright, so I have some green peppers here, and I'm just going to cut and de-seed them. Then I'm just going to cut them into strips because I'm going to use my food processor to make short work of it. Alright, so I have 3 cups of green peppers, and I've poured that into the pot. Now I'm just going to peel a couple of onions and see how much that gives me. I want about the same onion to pepper ratio. So, and salsa is really just what you want in your salsa. So, If you like it more tomatoey, if you like it more peppery, spicy, the seasonings are kind of endless that you can pick based on your taste preference. I think I'm going to have to get another onion. I don't think that that's going to make 3 cups. These onions are pretty small. Put the lid on. There's one. There's 2. I'm just hitting the pause button until it's diced to my desire. So that's pretty good. You just always want to remove the blade before you pour, or you're going to have a sharp blade coming at you. 3 cups now of onions. Alright, so now for the hot peppers, I'm actually going to put some gloves on because hot peppers can stay on your hands for a long time. So I just have these kitchen disposable gloves that I wear when I'm cutting hot peppers. Especially, I wear contacts, so I'm going to touch my eyes at some point today to take my contacts out. And you don't want any hot peppers on your eyes still. And then do that because your entire eye is going to burn off. So it's always smart if you're messing with hot things to wear gloves. Now, if you don't know, the hot in peppers comes from the ribs of the pepper and the seeds. So when you remove all of those, you are eliminating a lot of the heat. And so I just go around with my spoon and I call out that, and then I just take it and I get as much of that out as I can. I like heat, but my kids don't. So if my kids are going to have this in their food, I can't have it really hot. They can handle about a medium. So I leave in some of the seeds. Like there's some seeds in there and some ribs. And I have 6 hot peppers here. So it's not going to be overly hot. And I cut the top of this one because there was a bad spot at the top and I didn't want that in my salsa. So I'm leaving some of the seeds. So the processor really cuts out a lot of time. If you have a food processor, this is a Ninja style. And I just use the pulse button over and over, and that's what moves the blades. You don't want it to be on because you don't want this to turn into a puree where it's all blended together. You want to be able to see the cuts. And my tomatoes, I just did a rough chop. So nothing fancy there, just just rough chopped them. I didn't have to de-seed any of them because they were pretty firm. And then I'm going to actually cook this solution once I get all the seasonings in for an hour so that it reduces. And it should reduce to about half of what's in my stock pot. So I just take it at the end of the pepper and then go up. And it does a great job of removing all the ribs and the seeds. So I'm going to take some cloves of garlic, and I'm actually going to put this in a mincer. So that's what I have next. And I'm just going to use my pulse button over a little smaller diced than my green peppers. And I think that's perfect. So I'm going to remove the blade. I'm just going to pour this in. That way I can get any last remaining onion or green pepper out of the food processor. Alright, so for the garlic, I have a grater. This is a fine grater, and I just cut the ends of my garlic off. And then I'm going to mince it in. And I have 5 small cloves or 3 large cloves of garlic. I'm kind of adjusting my recipe based on the amount of tomatoes I have. Alright, so now I'm going to just put my grater over my pot, and I'm just using the grater to finely chop the garlic. You just want to be careful not to get your finger because it will cut it. So I have my cloves of garlic minced in there. I have all my peppers, my green peppers, and my jalapeno peppers, and then onion. And so now I'm just going to gently stir this around to mix. And then I'm going to add my seasonings and then bring it to a boil. And then I'm going to simmer it for an hour. So for seasonings, you need 2 teaspoons of pickling salt. And the reason for pickling salt in this recipe is because it's the way to preserve the tomatoes because they are acidic. And then 1 3/4 cups of apple cider vinegar. So there's my vinegar, and then I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Some people use cumin. My kids would prefer the taste of chili powder, and because that kind of poured in, I'm going to do less than 2 on the second. And then you're going to stir it. And I'm going to start my heat. I'm going to bring it to a boil. And then once it's at a boil, I'm going to simmer for an hour. And while it's simmering, I will be washing and sterilizing quart-sized jars so that I can can this. And we will use the hot water bath method. to preserve our salsa. So I'm just got my heat on high and I'm stirring in the seasonings. And it's pretty watery right now, just from the juices of the tomatoes, the vinegar. Just like in pickles, it's pickling, it's preserving the tomatoes so that they don't turn. You want some kind of an acid to preserve the color. So, if you don't like chunky salsa, because right now it's kind of chunky, you could always take a potato masher and mash it after it's cooked down. We personally like chunkier salsa, so that is why I just did a rough chop of tomatoes. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So that is the salsa right now. And as you can tell, it's kind of watery. And after it comes to a boil, when I simmer, it will reduce to about half of that size. So went out and got more apple cider vinegar. You always want to have extras when you are cooking. So there's my vinegar, and then I'm going to do 2 tablespoons of chili powder. Some people use cumin. My kids would prefer the taste of chili powder, and because that kind of poured in, I'm going to do less than 2 on the second. And then you're going to stir it. And I'm going to start my heat. I'm going to bring it to a boil. And then once it's at a boil, I'm going to simmer for an hour. And while it's simmering, I will be washing and sterilizing quart-sized jars so that I can can this. And we will use the hot water bath method to preserve our salsa. So I'm just got my heat on high and I'm stirring in the seasonings. And it's pretty watery right now, just from the juices of the tomatoes, the vinegar. Just like in pickles, it's pickling, it's preserving the tomatoes so that they don't turn. You want some kind of an acid to preserve the color. So I have this. And if you don't like chunky salsa, because right now it's kind of chunky, you could always take a potato masher and mash it after it's cooked down. We personally like chunkier salsa, so that is why I just did a rough chop of tomatoes. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. So that is the salsa right now. And as you can tell, it's kind of watery. And after it comes to a boil, when I simmer, it will reduce to about half. Alright, so I have washed and sanitized my jars. And I have my lids in a saucepan back here and boiling water. My salsa is simmering away. It's reduced to at least half. And I'm bringing my hot water bath up to a boil. And something that I didn't video myself adding was I had put in 3 tablespoons of sugar into the salsa just to cut the acidity out just a tad. And I can check my seasonings if I want to put a little bit in a dish, if I want, or taste with a taste spoon, but it is really hot. So you just want to make sure that you're letting it cool before you taste it, and then to remember that it hasn't cooled, so it's not going to taste like salsa that you would eat at a Mexican restaurant. I'm going to take a little tablespoon, and I'm just going to taste the juice, because that's going to tell me my seasonings. I don't really need the tomato and onion and all of that. Tastes pretty good. I think I'm going to add just a little bit more sugar because I like this sweet and hot. And I may add just a little bit more chili powder to give it a little bit more kick. So I added 3 tablespoons more of sugar, and I added about a half of a tablespoon more of chili powder as seasoning. So I like the sweet yet a little kick. And I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's been reduced. So as you can tell, the colors are still there. They're deep. And all my veggies are cooked. So now I'm going to carefully ladle my salsa in my jar, and I want to ensure that I leave at least an inch headspace because I am going to process it in my hot water bath for 20 minutes. Alright, so now they're all in there, and I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. And while they are processing, because the water's already boiling, I'm going to wash up some dishes and clean up the kitchen. And so we're going to let this sit on a towel to completely cool, usually 24 hours. And then once the 24 hours is up, I will write salsa and then 2020 so that I know whenever I put it in my canning cupboard, I'm going to use the older dates first and then these last. And don't forget this little one that's about a fourth of the way full back here. I'm actually going to put that in the fridge and use it just because there is a lot of headspace and it probably didn't can all the way, but it did get processed. So it will last longer than about a week in the fridge. So now it'll last months. So that is salsa. I hope to hear what kind of salsas you guys make.